All right, everyone. Hopefully, you got some good gratitudes written down and you're ready for the day. You know, that song, that Devi prayer that we were just listening to, um, I have asked Ruby to one of these days when she does the morning ascent to actually sit and translate that for us. So hopefully that will come someday when the next time she does morning ascent, because I've had her do that for me and tell me kind of what they are saying there, and it's actually kind of cool to hear and have Ruby translate that. So something to look forward to. So hopefully we'll have that for you guys. All right. Well, hopefully you got some good gratitudes and intentions, and if you want to share some of those, I think it's a good idea. It's always great. It's always a good idea to share what you are grateful for. You know, writing it down is awesome, but I think sharing it with people actually solidifies it a little bit more in you. So, would love to see you guys put some of those things, or even some of your intentions of what you want to accomplish and have take place. Well, as I was thinking of what I wanted to talk to you guys, I was reminded of a story that my son told me. This was back in probably like 2012 or so. So, in order to help you understand what I'm going to talk about, I got to give you this background and give you the story. And what I want to talk to you about is a guy by the name of Chris Shelton. Now, you may or may not have know who he is. In fact, a lot of times when you say Chris Shelton, people will think Blake Shelton, the country singer. And in fact, so Chris Shelton is today the high school baseball coach at Cottonwood High School, which is just down the street from the office here. Well, my son went to Cottonwood High School and he played baseball at Cottonwood. And Chris Shelton at that time was one of the assistant coaches. Well, Chris Shelton, as he would go and coach and they would play other teams, people would consistently ask, "Hey, I heard Chris Shelton coaches on this team." Well, like I said, you guys, most of you probably do not know who he is. So I'm going to tell you about who he is in a second here. But when they would go and play out of state tournaments, so they would go down to Vegas and play. There's a high school down in Vegas that's called Bishop Gorman that produces some really good athletes because it's a very expensive private school. Well, they would go down there to play, and other coaches and things would usually say, "Hey, I heard that Blake Shelton coaches on this team." And they would say that to Chris Shelton, and he would say, "No, he doesn't. He doesn't coach on this team because Blake Shelton didn't coach on the team, but it was Chris Shelton that did." Well, Chris Shelton went to Cottonwood High School. So when he was in high school, he went to Cottonwood High School. He played baseball, and he was a very good baseball player. But when it came time to go to college, he actually only ended up playing at Salt Lake Community College here in Salt Lake. And he played at Salt Lake Community College, but he really started to develop as a baseball player at Salt Lake Community College. And as a result of that, then the University of Utah came to him and recruited him to go and play baseball at the University of Utah, which he did. After he got done playing baseball at the University of Utah, he got drafted to into the major leagues. Well, he didn't get a play, but he got drafted to a baseball team there, which was the Detroit Tigers. Now, what ended up happening is Chris Shelton, almost said Blake Shelton there, Chris Shelton ended up playing baseball and professional baseball from 2001 through 2010. Now, during that time that he was playing professional baseball, he didn't automatically make it up to the major leagues. In fact, he actually didn't make it. So he started professional baseball, and I said he was drafted by Detroit. That's not true. It was Pittsburgh, but he played in their minor league system and then got traded over to Detroit's minor league system into 2004. Well, in 2006, or excuse me, in 2004, he got called up from the minor leagues from playing in double A to go up to triple A, and then actually got called up to the major leagues. So in 2004 was when he made his major league debut. Well, in the process of that, he then played for the Detroit Tigers and would go up and down, which now, for you guys that don't understand the way that it works, in professional baseball, they have many different levels, and you start at sometimes even just what's called rookie ball, where you're basically just playing a bunch of other rookies. You're not really playing against any top people. Well, you slowly work your way up from single A to double A to triple A to then the majors. Well, so he would bounce between the majors and the minors, the triple A of Detroit during 2004, 2005. But then in 2006, he actually got to start for the Detroit Tigers. Now, part of why that is, and I apologize if you guys are like not baseball, but hopefully you're following my story. There's a point to it. So he, in 2006, actually was able to get to start to, he started that season at the major league level and actually got to be a starter on the Detroit Tigers team in 2006. And the reason was he had been a catcher growing up, but he was a good hitter. And if you hit the ball in baseball, you will play. So they were finding a spot for him to put in 2006, and they needed a first baseman. So in 2006, Chris Shelton got to be the starting first baseman for the Detroit Tigers. Now, here's the interesting thing with this. Chris Shelton in 2006 started the first 2 weeks of the season and set a record that has still not to this day been broken. He hit in the first 13 games of the season, he hit 9 home runs. Well, he was being compared in Detroit in the newspapers, and the sportscasters in Detroit were now all of a sudden comparing him to the next Babe Ruth. He was going to be, or at minimum, the next Cecil Fielder, because he was on such a tear of hitting that many home runs. And had he been able to continue that, hitting 9 home runs in 13 games, he would have broken every record in the major league hitting. But he unfortunately was not able to do that. And he continued to play professional baseball, as I said, from 2006 all the way down to 2010. So my point in telling you this is for you to understand that he understood what it was like to be in the major leagues. And in fact, actually a little funny side note story to that. So when my son was going to school at Cottonwood and playing, and Chris Shelton was the assistant coach there at the time, what would happen is in the fall, during the actual World Series, Cottonwood would do an inter-squad World Series. So they would get the kids that were on the baseball team and they would break them up into 2 teams, and then they would call it the World Series, which would take place during this. Well, my son's best friend was one of the pitchers on the team, and his name was Hunter. Well, Hunter had pitched, and he actually ended up losing one of the games for their little World Series at Cottonwood High School. And after the game, Chris Shelton went up to him and he said, "What's the matter, Hunter?" Because Hunter was pouting a little bit, which I coached him when he was little, and he would tend to do that if he lost the game. And so he was pouting a little bit. And Chris Shelton said, "What's the matter, Hunter?" And Hunter said, "Well, I lost," and da-da-da. And Chris said, "Well, it's okay. Don't worry about it." And Hunter turned to Chris Shelton and he said, "Do you know what it feels like to lose the World Series?" Because they had lost in this Cottonwood Mini World Series. Well, one of the things that I didn't tell you guys is in 2006, the Detroit Tigers actually made it to the World Series that year. Chris Shelton was on the team, but they lost that series to the St. Louis Cardinals. And so Chris Shelton turned to Hunter and he said, "Not only do I know what it feels like to lose the World Series, I know what it feels like to lose the actual World Series." We'll kind of put Hunter in his place a little bit there. Okay, here's my point of the story. As I go through and I tell you about that with Chris Shelton, here's the point. One of the things that he would say to the baseball team was that think about working on the fundamentals of baseball as the same thing as putting hay in the barn. Now, you have probably heard the expression of the hay's in the barn, or we're putting the hay in the barn. What that basically means when you talk about putting the hay in the barn is, or saying that the hay is in the barn, what it means is the work is finished. We've done all the work, it's done. See, so what he would tell the baseball team that he had learned as a professional baseball player was that when you work on the fundamentals, it is the same thing as putting the hay in the barn. The hay is in the barn, all the work's done, and now you have that to rely on once the game starts. See, that's for us. What I want to talk about is for us. Are you putting the hay in the barn? Meaning, are you doing the work on the fundamentals of this business so that when it comes time to play in the World Series, or for you, get on the phone and start prospecting, have you put the hay in the barn that is going to allow you to then go and access that when it's now time for you to actually perform? And are you going to be able to perform the way he did the first 13 games of the season, meaning he was on track to break every single record, and still to this day holds the record in the major leagues for the most home runs in a 2-week period? See, have you put the work in enough for you to be able to do that? And so what I want to share with you today is I want to talk to you about some fundamentals or some keys to you being able to make $250,000 a year. Now, we read this morning as I was going through and we were doing the affirmations, we did the 12 steps to the summit of success. Well, as we go through and we talk about that 12 steps to the summit of success, ultimately you could look at those as being the fundamentals as well. And just so that you know where those came from, in fact, I wasn't intending to do this, but let me put those back up here real quick for a second. And let's take a look at them for a minute here, because ultimately, if you were to think about these as being the fundamentals to our business, and have you done and implemented these things? Now, let me give you the background of where this came from. So what happened is in Salt Lake area, and I guess I should say along the Wasatch Front, because the reason this came about is there is a broker, and I believe that this broker still does this, but that what he would do is he will recruit people out of real estate school, and he will tell them that he will guarantee them that they could make $100,000 a year in this business. And he says, I'll sign a contract for you. Well, tons of agents, or I shouldn't say tons, a number of agents would go and sign there because he would tell them, I will guarantee you $100,000 a year. Well, what John, George, and Rob decided they needed to do is to sit down and come up with something that they could combat that with, which essentially would say, we can get you to 24 plus transactions per year. Well, in today's market and in today's numbers, that's going to put you somewhere around $250,000 a year if you can do 24 transactions. Now, so what they did is they came up with these 12 steps of here's what you need to do if you want to be able to be successful. So I would ask you, how are you doing when it comes to those things? Are you taking the time to do these 12 things? Well, that isn't essential. That's not really the key things that I wanted to hit on, but I thought it helpful to look at that as we read those every single day. If you are doing less than 24 transactions per year, I would invite you to look at those 12 steps and say, which of those 12 steps am I not doing? Which ones should I implement? Which ones should I be changing or working on and getting better? See, I was actually even watching a video last night, of a guy who is a coach in the major leagues by the name of Ron Washington. I love Ron Washington. He has coached for a number of different teams, and right now, this year, he was an assistant coach for the Atlanta Braves. But the thing that I love about Ron Washington is he works on the fundamentals with these guys. And I was watching this video yesterday, and what he said is he was showing a drill that he does with the baseball players. And it was fascinating to me because what he said is when he teaches these professional baseball players these drills, he said they have never learned this in their whole life. Now stop and think about that. They're making millions of dollars a year to play baseball, and he's telling them they've never learned how to really fundamentally field a baseball. I love listening to Ron Washington talk about the fundamentals of baseball. And the reason I guess I love baseball so much is because it is so relevant to what we do in real estate, and it's so relevant to life. So here's the 5 things that I wanted to talk to you guys about in terms of the fundamentals, in terms of putting the hay in the barn so that you have it there to rely on and get when you need it. And the first one is this: you should be setting at least one appointment every single day. So that's number 1, is set one appointment every single day. Your objective every single day when you get on the phone, when you get up and you start to work, is to set an appointment that day. And I've shared with you guys the story for me of I told my wife, the first question you need to ask me when I walk in the door is, did you set an appointment today? I wanted the accountability from my wife of, did you set an appointment today? Because I knew that way when I was time to go home, I was going to be asked, did you set an appointment? So the number one fundamental to this business is you have got to set minimum of one appointment a day. Minimum of one appointment every single day. Number two, are you staying in contact with your sphere of influence? If this business is not getting easier for you over time, I 100% can tell you it is because you're not working your sphere of influence. You have got to be working your sphere of influence. Now, when I say that, here's what I mean. You need to have them set up on some type of an email campaign, or be at least emailing them something monthly. Once a month, getting them some type of a mail. Good idea to send them a snail mail quarterly. People do not get things in the mail anymore besides bills and junk. If you could send something to them that was personal, it's going to mean something. Okay, next, on terms of your sphere of influence, be posting some things about real estate on Facebook periodically, or Instagram or Twitter, but use social media as a way to be in front of the people about real estate. You've got to make sure you're doing that. And then at a minimum with your SOI, make sure you're calling them at least quarterly. There are some of the people you need to be calling more than that. I had one person in my SOI, she would cut my hair, and I would go get my hair cut about every 5 to 6 weeks. I tended to go every 5 weeks. And the reason being is because almost every time I showed up, she had somebody else that I needed to call about real estate. So make sure that you're at minimum talking to them quarterly. Brian Noel talked about it yesterday. If you guys missed it, go back and watch that again, of just calling and talking to them about some real estate, but also about how they're doing. Man, I tell you what, and I think Brian's on here this morning. So I meant to come over and talk to you yesterday, Brian, but I didn't get over there. Awesome job yesterday. To me, if we were going to put together an all-time hits of Morning Ascent, that one is going to be at the top of the list, at least for me. So thanks, Brian. That was awesome. So stay in touch with your SOI. Brian said that is where it's going from, and that's where his business is growing from, is that and doing door knocking occasionally with his expireds. So make sure you're staying on top of the sphere of influence. That is your mainstay. When we talk about putting hay in the barn, holy cow, that's it. You're creating to where you're going to get business out of your SOI, and it's going to be there to rely on. And then the last thing that I would recommend is doing with your SOI is to do some type of a client appreciation once or twice a year. Now, once we get past COVID, which we will, go rent out a movie theater. Do some type of a gathering that you're going to bring your sphere of influence together. The reason we as a company will usually try to do that a couple of times a year is to help you get in front of your sphere of influence. So that's so number one is set an appointment in terms of our fundamentals. Number two, make sure you're working your sphere of influence. You've got to be staying in touch with them and following up with them. Next one. Third, you should have an objective to take at minimum one listing a month. One listing every single month should be your objective, especially in today's market. Holy cow, if you could get one listing a month, think about what that would do for you. How would that change your business? So some ideas on that. Go and look at homes that expired off of the market in the last couple of years that have not come back on. More than likely, they did not sell because they were overpriced. Well, what has the market done in the last 2 years? Gone up dramatically. Those people could now sell their house. Go do that. Or go back and just find an area that you want to work and get some listings. Find people who bought 5, 6, 7 years ago and just call those people, because there's a pretty good chance they're moving. Or go to townhouses. Townhouses or condos are going to turn over even more often. So call some of those that have bought 3, 4 years ago, because it's very likely they've gotten enough equity. They want to get into a house now because they're tired of hearing their neighbors or whatever. But take one listing per month. So that's number 3. Make sure you're taking at least one listing a month. Have this be your objectives. Number 4 is, now that we've got these listings, don't forget to make sure you're calling them weekly. Stay in touch with your sellers weekly. The number one complaint that we seem to hear is, an agent listed my house and I never heard from them again. In fact, I remember an agent, I went out on a for sale by owner appointment. I came back to the office. They said, "Did you get the listing?" And I said, "No." They were so far up in the night on their price and they would not come down. I didn't take the listing. And one of the agents in the office said to me, "Well, give me the phone number because I'll go take it." Well, this guy was known in the office for he would take any listing, any price. He would drop his sign in the front yard, never call the people ever again, unless he got an offer. There were constant complaints from that. So to avoid that and to loop that back up to your SOI, if you want to get referrals, make sure you're giving good customer service to these sellers. So make sure you're calling your clients weekly to update them. And then the number 5 thing in terms of fundamentals, and I know I'm preaching to the choir on this one, but participate. Keep participating. Again, I notice Brian Noel on here almost every single morning. Brian is on here watching Morning Ascent. And George said he's on track to make $1 million. Brian said, "Hey, whoa, hold on, don't, but regardless, let's say it's 700,000, 800,000. Not too shabby, yet he's on Morning Ascend every day. Correlation? Maybe. I don't know. You have to ask Brian. But participate. Get involved. It is amazing how many people will just say, "Oh, I've heard George tell all those stories," or "I've heard John say that before." Okay. You think Brian hasn't? He's been here for a long time. Well, his business continues to go up. I wonder if there's something to do with that. Well, so here's the thing, guys. What would it do for your business if you did those 5 things consistently? If you took an appointment or set an appointment every day, you called your SOI, at least 3 to 5 people every day on your SOI, that you took a listing every single week, you stayed in touch with the sellers, and then you were to participate. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, but part of why I'm preaching to the choir is don't let yourself get in the habit of going, "I've heard it before, I'm not getting on there again." It is a good reminder. It is said that nobody ever crosses the same river or the same stream twice. Either the stream has changed or you have changed. So just keep that in mind. As you hear some of these stories over and over again, ask yourself, yeah, I might have heard the story, but am I doing the principle that's involved in the story? Because you probably are not. And so therefore you can glean something from it. Well, all right. That's my challenge for you guys today. Put the hay in the barn, put in the work so that when it's performance time, it's World Series time, you're ready to rock and roll. You've got that to draw on, and you can go through that same streak that Chris Shelton did, but hopefully not only for 2 weeks, that you can do it for your career. All right. Thanks for being with me, guys. Hope you got something good out of this. We're going to wrap it up here now with doing our closing affirmations. And I just appreciate so much that you guys would jump on and be with me today. So let's get this wrapped up with these closing affirmations. If I can find them on here again.